Martin, good morning, Britain. So, another interest rate hike, the 10th in a row, means even more pressure, doesn't it, on families already struggling with the cost of living, and everyone struggling with the cost of living. But is there some hope on the horizon? Well, since December 2021, there's been a dramatic increase from 0.1% to 3.5%.
That looks exceptionally steep, doesn't it? Yesterday, the Bank of England pushed it up even further to 4%, but analysts are now predicting rates will peak in the summer at around 4.5%, so another 0.5% above where we are right now. We're joined by Senior Lecturer in Finance at Kingston University, Louise Cooper. Louise, thank you for coming in.
Nodding furiously during that. I don't know whether it was at the hope or the figures.
Well, it was when Ben said rapidly increased, and I'm like, Ben, that's completely spot on. The most rapid increase we've had in interest rates for decades.
It's not often that I'm completely spot on as well, Louise. So
That's two huge moments.
Can we just... So do you believe that that's where it's going to peak, that we're going to peak at sort of 4.5%, you know, so we've maybe got another 0.5% to go?
There's been a big change in where we think peak rates are going to be. So if you remember in the Trussonomics debacle, at that point, rates could the markets were predicting rates would peak at 6. So it's come down a lot from then. Possibly 4.25.
Right.
The risk is that inflation is worse than expected. So the Bank of England yesterday said inflation was going to fall rapidly to about 1% by spring 2024, right? Really rapid fall in inflation. But inflation is still 10. We haven't seen 10% inflation for 40 years. We are in uncharted territory, and the risk is that inflation does not fall. And that is because of wage growth, OK? We already know that goods prices are falling, the world has opened up, China's factories are opening up, China's opening up, and therefore goods, the price of manufactured things, is falling rapidly. But what is worrying is services, which is getting your hair done, taking your car to a garage. And that's all about the price of labour. And wage growth, private sector wage growth, is over 7%. And that's the first time we have seen that since records began in 2001. So the wage growth, growth, if it continues, depending on what the government does with all these public sector strikes, if wage growth accelerates from here, then the Bank of England will have to react, and it will react by increasing rates further.
I didn't mean to interrupt, because you went on to say it, and actually, are you giving an argument, because it sounds like it, for the government sticking to their guns, not increasing the wages of nurses, not increasing public sector, because there's that separate economic argument that public sector doesn't necessarily lead to private sector increases?
I can completely understand why people, workers, faced with 10% inflation, and one would well argue, I could well argue, that that probably is an underestimate. I don't know about your grocery bills, but mine don't feel like they're going up like that. I can understand why workers would want that. The good news is if the bank's right, then that inflation will be falling very, very, very rapidly, right? So it's a one-off hit, possibly. But if the government does, increase the wages, if private sector wages do increase more rapidly, then the cost to that is higher interest rates. So be careful what you wish for. If you wish for a 10% wage increase, well, the cost to that may well be that interest rates don't peak at 4.5, they peak at 5, and actually interest rates stay a lot higher for a lot longer, because it's, when you get wage increases, then you get inflation, then you get wage increases. It's the wage price spiral, and it means that inflation is stickier.
Yeah.
And what I mean by stickier is it sticks around for longer. And if that is the case, we will not see interest rates cut in the future.
How do we solve this? How does the government solve it, Louise? Because we all want inflation to come down, but we equally want nurses and teachers to be paid what they deserve to be paid.
It's a brutal one. It's a really, really tough one. I mean, the other problem we have as a country is a shortage of labour, shortage of workers. And a lot of that comes from people over 50 who are deciding not to work. And if we had more labour, that would help our long-term economic growth. One of the other things buried in the Bank of England's report yesterday was a reduction in sort of the long-term potential growth of our country. And that is really not good. And that is all to do with labour supply. Part of that is Brexit. Part of that is we need to get those in their 50s and 60s back into the workforce.
I don't know anybody over 50 that feels like they can retire. Who are these people?
Well, I have to say, I thought exactly that.
Yeah.
If you're going to work for 30 years, 20 till you're 50, and then not work for 30 years, I don't know how much money you've saved up, but my guess is not enough.
Right.
Working on their handicap on the golf course, isn't that what Jeremy Hunt said? Need to get them off the golf course. Amazing. Louise, thank you for coming in and sharing those thoughts. Certainly a lot to ruminate. You see why it's such a complicated situation for the government to solve all of those issues they've got lined up on the
Good luck.
table.